Hello and welcome to the Vision-Led Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Arin Fugate. I am a wellness educator and business coach for visionary leaders. I am on a mission to remind you that your intuition is always guiding you to your divine purpose. You were born at this time for a very important reason, and the time is now to shine in your truth. On the show, we talk about listening to your intuition, cultivating a successful mindset, next level leadership, and conscious capitalism. If you are new here, welcome. You are in the right place if you are an entrepreneur ready to uplevel your health and live in line with your true calling. Today on the show, we hear from Gwendolyn Terra. She is a systemic constellations facilitator and spiritual guide. Welcome to the show, Gwendolyn.
Thank you, Arin. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm looking forward to today and what we explore together.
I love constellation work. Before I get into the icebreaker questions, I will just share with the audience. If you don't know what constellation work is, you're going to know by the end of this call, I'm sure. But I have experienced 2 constellation sessions. One was at a yoga studio, and it was kind of for everybody there got to work on their own particular thing they wanted to work on. And I got to do it with my mom. And it was so cool because I was able to understand her in such a deeper way because of the constellation work. And then one time I was brought into a nonprofit and I had no idea what it was about. I was you'll remind me what the word is, but I was like
Representative.
I was a representative. And it was so cool to see how you can do constellation work for a business or an organization as well. So I love it, love it, love it. And I can't wait for my listeners to learn about this incredible system. So let's get to know Gwendolyn. Now, do you like Gwendolyn? Does anybody ever call you Gwen?
People who knew me before I was 20.
Okay, so Gwendolyn, which is a
rare thing. If they met before 20, then they can,
I got it. Okay, if they've known you for that long, then they can call you Gwen. Okay, so Gwendolyn.
People can call me G for short. So if they need.
Yeah. G or Gwendolyn. We're going to do icebreakers, which is one of my favorite parts of the episode, so we can start to get to know you. I love music. My followers know that I come from a background in music production, event production, music festivals. So new music is always good to me. So I like to ask my guests, what is your favorite hype song? Like, you need to get in your high flying disc. You have to go speak on stage. You're going to get on a podcast. What song do you put on the radio to hype you up?
That's hard for me because I have so many choices and different songs motivate me. One song that just came to mind for right now, and it's a recent song, is Follow Your Heart by Michael Franti. Michael Franti is often someone I'll go to for that kind of energy because he has many songs like that kind of get your energy going. And I've gotten to see him live a couple times. And so that's one that comes to mind for that. And then there's a song, Let There Be Light. So I've mixed dances. I've been, as part of my path, is I don't just do constellation work. I actually come from an embodiment point of view in my constellation work. I've been doing sacred movement practices for over 25 years and sacred dances. So I've led shamanic journey dances and ecstatic dances. So like Follow Your Heart is one of the ones that just came to mind for right now that's in my thread. But there's so many that are like that. And there's trying to remember this other song, but it's not really the get up and go song. So that's a good one. I actually I have on SoundCloud. So if you join my email, I can send you a link if you ask for it to some of the mixes I've made.
Great.
With different themes, because I've mixed dance journeys and I also mix what I call song journeys, which are just a whole bunch of songs. So
Ooh, I love that. So we'll put it in the show notes, how to get on your email list, because I know so many people would love the mixes. I host moon circles sometimes on Zoom, and we always end our moon circle with a dance. And I feel like you could just can move, like if you're doing intentions or if you're cleansing, like dancing it out in that way where nobody's watching, it's not for anybody else. It's just like, how does the music make you want to move? It's so therapeutic.
It is. And it's the core of actually where I come from in my work. I've led something that was called trance dance or shamanic dance journeys. So it was a blindfolded dance experience, and to take people on journeys to get into their bodies and really connect with spirit and align. So that's a huge part of my beginning path. And then as a dance facilitator. So you're right. I think and I feel like constellation work to me is actually feeds out of that ability to be tuned in and listen at those deeper levels and be in our bodies, to be in our bodies, tuned in and listen at deeper levels. And then to do that collectively.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Pretty profound how that took me to doing constellation work, actually. So
okay, we're going to dive into this whole journey. We're going to get into it.
Yeah.
So my second icebreaker question is, what's your favorite snack? Do you have any good snack tips for us?
I'm so like not that original. I like simple things, really. Two things that come to mind. I just love sliced apple and peanut butter.
Oh yeah.
I like a lot of things in peanut butter. So I also really love corn chips in peanut butter. And I always thought it was weird. And then I looked up something. I'm like, they're legumes. They're the same as beans. I don't like beans and corn chips, but I like peanut butter and corn chips. So that's.
Have you ever tried that?
I'll often have apple because I don't eat wheat, the gluten-free world. And so good corn chips and peanut butter and then apple. That's like a meal snack.
I got to try that. I love apples and peanut butter. It's such an inner child food for me.
And it tastes good though. I mean, it's just the perfect energizing,
It's good.
And I actually love pecans. That's the other thing, just to snack on pecans, because I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm from the South, and pecan trees actually grow all over around Austin. So I'm constantly looking for good pecans, and this is the time of year that they actually show up. But yeah.
Oh, yum. Yum.
My snacks that I will almost always have peanut butter and some kind of corn chip and an apple in my car.
Okay, that's a hot tip. Corn chips and peanut butter. I'm gonna try that. Okay, so you get to have tea or coffee with anyone alive or already passed. Who would you choose?
I don't know. Kind of the first thought that comes to mind, well, as I think about it deeper, I think I would love to speak with I would really love to speak with my grandmother, my mom's mom, because she died when I was a senior in high school, and I've done all this work, and there's like all these mysteries that have kind of shown up in my own receiving of constellations. And I kind of feel like that would be a neat conversation to have. And the other had to do with a teacher who passed away 2 years ago, who I trained the trance dance work with, and I hadn't seen him in many years. Both people on the other side that I would love to have that. The deeper, with him, I'd be like, what's it like over there? And with her, I'd be like, so tell me more about this whole system. I don't know very much about that. I've done a lot of work with. So yeah.
I'm really understand that, because I'm currently trying to put all the pieces together with my family history, and my mom and my dad have both passed away. All my grandparents, except for my grandma, is still alive. And when I ask her about stuff, she doesn't really give me the juice, she's not spilling the tea. She's like very surface about it. And I'm like, I want the dirt. I want to know it all. It's hard to get that because sometimes there's trauma involved. And so they're like protective of that information.
And in some way they're serving you by keeping that information. Because in constellation work, a big part of the practice is returning what belongs to others and letting them carry it. So it can be an active support for you to not want to tell you some of the story because they're wanting to carry it and not give it to you.
True. You also make me think that their story is their perspective, which could be very different from the bigger story. And that's what I like about Constellation, is you get to see the different points of view which can really help you fill in the gaps. So this is a perfect moment for us to just ask you to tell us what you do and how you help people, and what is this offering you bring in the world?
It's really interesting because that's always kind of the hardest question to answer. And it's interesting to me, especially since this is kind of like focused towards visionaries and entrepreneurs. I actually have a degree. My degree is in economics and psychology. So I've been curious about how systems work since I became an adult. And actually long before, because I also learned astrology since I was 9 or 10. So I've always been curious about how do we relate? How do we relate? And to me, what I do is about sacred relating. Even the economy is actually about sacred relating if you choose to go that way. And to me, that's the invitation that we're actually in right now, is what is sacred relating? How do we relate with a different level of awareness in all of our choices, right? So I come to constellation work early on. I came to it because I had done a lot of work. I'd done a lot of spiritual journey work. I had done healing work with others, for me and with others. And I had done a lot of these journey dances. I was talking about the shamanic dances, and I would see in the field, and everybody's blindfolded when they dance in that practice. So there's a whole lot of things we go in intention, but then when they're dancing, they're blindfolded. And I would be witnessing, and there'd usually be maybe 1 or 2 assistants holding space. And I would see how things moved in the field. You'd think everyone's blindfolded, they'd run into each other. They don't. Sometimes there'd be a giant room, they'd all be right next to each other dancing. There'd be these energetics that I could feel that were connected. And I had done ancestral training in that lineage of work, because we did ancestral work. So constellations to me are, and I do both individual sessions working with those tools and group work. But when someone says they're doing a constellation in the format that you're talking about, which source that name, calling it constellation work, sources from someone named Bert Hellinger, who brought it into the West. And he spent 15 years studying with Zulu tribes and learning about, well, he was actually a priest sent there to convert them. And then he quit being a priest and learned with them about their ways of doing things. And their practice was always about honoring the ancestors and really listening, that idea that there's 7 generations, and that thinking that through, that both the ones that are the next generations and then the past generations, that everything that's happening to us is connected with the bigger story, right? Like that bigger connected choice of events and how things have been impacted over time. And so that practice of listening like that, he came back into more Western and became a psychotherapist in Germany. And that way of, he realized when he was doing individual sessions with people that all their stuff actually wasn't just what they were talking about. It was systemic. It was the idea is that we're basically bodies that are part of a bigger body. To me, it's like, I think of a tree, like we're branches in a tree, but we're part of a tree, and the tree has roots, and we're the branches. And so the branches to me are, they're reaching to the light. They literally bring in light. That's what the leaves bring in light, photosynthesis, bring in light, comes into the body of the tree, and the tree goes down into the roots and it draws up life energy from the earth. So when you're conceptualizing that way of being with the earth, constellations are about tapping into our roots, and also tapping into the branches, that anything that we're part of these bigger systems of energy all the time. Our family system is really strong, our biology, but any system that we've created with, like you were talking about at work, or any relationship we've ever had, they're all part of the systems that we are a part of, right? We're all interconnected. And that has felt true to me all along, even with my, working with astrology tools, even going into what I did as a thesis in college about how our perceptions affect our economic behavior. So that idea, like you were saying, getting different perspectives. So what a constellation is, I'm doing the long version to get there some, but a constellation, what it looks like, to me, the easiest way to say what it looks like is a group channeling experience. And what it usually does, we're usually sourcing from a specific individual's system. Although I also do transpersonal ones where we create a collective one together, and everybody participates in creating the heart space, and then we create a symbolic one outside of that. But often the original constellation started you're sourcing from someone. Like I would pick, if it was your constellation, like you mentioned your mom, there would be a circle of people there. So there are people holding the space of witness and people also holding the space of what you were talking about, representative, and then the person receiving the constellation. To me, it's a collective healing process. And it gets to layers we can't get to by ourselves. Because the collective energy, this is like my passion, so there's endless stuff to talk about. But our bodies are part of the earth body, and when we tune into our bodies, which is why I come from very strong embodiment practices, we tune into our bodies, we actually tune into a deeper level of listening that's connected to what's called the field, the morphogenetic field that we're all connected to, and the systems that we're part of in it. And we can tune in and listen to that. And when we do it together, it creates a stronger field. And the person who's officially getting a constellation is the one that we're sourcing from their system symbolically, either their work or their family life. That's where we're sourcing from. And then people come in and they represent parts of the system. They can represent your mother. They can represent your gift to the world. They can represent money. They can represent an event that happened at a particular point in time. So they come in and let that energy, they come into the field, and I take a lot of time to create an intentional space for that to happen. They come in, and so if you came in and represented, or someone came in and represented, they step in and they let themselves be a conduit for that information, to let that information come through. And often there's things that have happened that have not been acknowledged in a system that continue to perpetuate in a system until there's acknowledgement. And so that's what happens. So often there's some deep feelings or something that happened. Maybe someone was murdered. Maybe there's all different kinds of things that could happen. And when the representatives come in, we get to listen from that deeper space. And it's not so much about the story. To me, I'm really listening to, what are you noticing in your body? What are you feeling? We're going in, I feel like we're exploring terrain together, and we're listening to the voices, and we're actually giving them voice, and we're witnessing them, so they're being seen. And then there's others, if you have a big enough group, you have more witnesses too, right? And the witnesses are also holding space. So these things are being acknowledged and seen, which is our core needs, to be acknowledged and seen. So we're bringing that in, and that can allow for profound changes. But it looks like a group of people gathering, someone sourcing the constellation, and then the facilitator, I'm often looking to what pieces I think would be good to bring in to represent. And then as that happens, as those voices get heard, there's certain movements and practices and statements that can really help shift the energy patterns of where things are stuck. So the last piece is in the roots. There can be these places where things are out of place, or they haven't been acknowledged, or people are out of place in their relationships. So the roots are tangled, so you can't draw any life energy from them. And in order to expand like a tree, right, to grow, we need resource. We need resource from the earth. And the earth can be represented also too. All kinds of things can be represented. And different ones have a lot of significance. So that energy is really, so it's about shifting the patterns that are in the way of us being able to actually open and receive more love and support in our lives. And also in doing that work, so as a representative, when everybody who comes gets their system moved. So you might represent a mother in someone else's system, but it's going to help you work on your stuff with your mother, and as a mother, if you are one. Like, it's going to help you get different points of view of that experience. And so everyone's really getting a constellation, but it's sourcing from one. And we're all getting this collective healing experience together. And it gets to things that we often don't even know so much about. But once it happens, you're like, oh, and that different perspective creates, to me, it creates this level of ongoing awe. Like, I have a lot of awe about what happens, even though I've done it for years. I'm like, wow. And for me, in terms of the world we're in right now, like a different level of compassion for every part, because every part serves the system. We all come from perpetrators. If we have one drop of, if we're in the US and we have one drop of Caucasian blood, we are all part of people who came over and claimed land from others. And in many different tribes, indigenous tribes, they weren't always nice to each other. I mean, there's lots of things in the systems that are there. And so this is about having compassion for all the parts. That's a lot of information. So
Oh, it's great. It's great. What I would love to kind of bring the listeners to is some real examples of when you might want to get a constellation.
yeah.
So I'm going to just give you a couple of things that came to mind while you're talking, and maybe you could tell us how you'd work with that.
Mhm.
So one thing that comes up a lot for a new entrepreneur, I know I've had to work through it, I'm still working through it after almost 20 years in business, is poverty consciousness. And
Yeah.
poverty consciousness can sometimes come from like my grandma was Depression era. And so would that be something that I could come to you for as a new entrepreneur and be like, I'm having this money block, this financial block. Maybe I know it's poverty consciousness or I don't know what it is. And you could facilitate a constellation to help me move through that. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, totally. You can, because basically it's wherever something's blocked and stuck and you can't move it. And I often find people come to this work after they've done a lot of other work. The constellation work isn't really the beginning of the spiritual path. It's like you've done a lot of your stuff. You're like, this is still stuck. How do I move this energy? Because it's our relationship with money is very much connected to our relationship with our mother and how that energy flowed. Then the lineage pieces of what happened in our system where money things happened, and that there's a lot of that. So knowing the depression is one thing, but also knowing what energy she actually carried or who was harmed or impacted, where it actually had a different, life or death thing that's in the circuitry, because it's, the physiology of our bodies is, there's all the research in epigenetics now. We're carrying that story. We're literally carrying the emotional experience. We know that scientifically of our grandmothers and our mothers. We're carrying it from before we were born. We're carrying that experience and they're carrying theirs. So we've gotten that at least, if not probably from I would say from all of our system pieces of that. So yeah, if you're wanting to build your work, there's two things. There'd be like, what are you wanting to create? Where is it blocked? So it'd be specific, but that would be something, I would work with, because it's like, it's what happens that I would say is it's the block is because usually you're trying to expand. And I think that feeling of the branch on the tree is really important, because we are only ready to move the deeper rooted pieces if there's a new energy we're trying to do and it activates that. Like we might have a lot of flow and then we hit the block of poverty consciousness and we're like, what? And I wouldn't even I would be careful about calling it poverty consciousness, because that gives it a lot of power, because it gives it the whole systemic story. And the way we can change things is going into the piece of our story that's connected in. And I've done collective transpersonal ones like we talked about around money, and that's intense stuff. And the only thing that could shift that was when I brought in the next generation.
Like future generation?
Yeah, the next generation, the children to come, the creations to come, whatever's to come, like the seeds of the tree, actually is what will motivate us to move the pattern that's stuck in the roots. Because if we don't have something we're moving towards, our motivation to move the energy and the emotional work and what it's going to invite us to move. So definitely I can do that. And I've helped people with their business but I just honor the complexity of it. And it's often connected to a systemic pattern, like a specific systemic pattern in the lineage. And I can do that both in my individual sessions and in the work, because the body carries the story. It knows what's happened. It's because it's tuned into the bigger system. So yeah. And it's pretty amazing when that stuff moves, how you feel it, right? I'm sure that's the other thing if you've been in constellations, because emotions and energy really moves through. It's very physical experience. So.
What was amazing to me being a representative was the moment I stepped into, I'm a representative, and I was not me anymore. It's not that I wasn't me, but I was clearly a channel. And then the moment that I was not the representative anymore, like feeling such a delineation between those two spaces was really powerful. And especially not knowing anything about the nonprofit. I walked into the room, didn't know anyone there, didn't know what they did. So it wasn't like I had to have any information. Such a cool thing. My mom was a channel, so I grew up understanding the process of channeling. So it's also familiar to me. And I know maybe some people are like, what's channeling? So would you want to talk to that?
I want to talk about it because I want to talk about what you just said. First of all, when you step in and represent, you're still you. You're just expanding and letting an energy flow through you. So even if you don't know what channel, although most of us know the word, you're a conduit. You're letting an energy experience flow through you so it has voice. And you're also here yourself in your body witnessing what's flowing through you. So there's both things happening. And I actually think the practice of representing, and I've been in a lot of constellations as a representative and a facilitator and received them, is that you start to get to know this experience of when you intentionally step in and allow yourself with consent to be a channel for this energy. And it's pretty profound. It can be intense emotions and feelings just by looking at another representative. But I say that because we're actually all doing that all the time. We're taking on energies and systems all the time. And to me, it brings a consciousness into it by choice, where often we're taking on energies inside of a system and we don't even know that we're doing that. And a lot of the tools I'm sharing are practices that you can start to notice, wow, I'm carrying this for someone. Let me get clear on that. Let me get clear on what's mine and what's theirs, so that we're consciously carrying energy for each other's. Because to me, that's the evolution, is being conscious, aware of what we're carrying and being in conscious choice with it. Like saying, okay, I'm going to do this. And we will do this instinctively. We will carry energy instinctively. But when we do it in a constellation, it's intentional. And I take a lot of time, and most people do, going into the constellation and stepping out of it, so that people can have a sense of where they are, where they're expanding and holding another energy, and then making sure they come back into their own energy space. Because channeling could seem really overwhelming. But to me, what it teaches is that we're actually all doing it all the time. Like if I'm in a relationship, I'm taking on the family system patterns of the person I'm with, dating or married to, and they're taking on mine, because we merge systems. And so it's like, and then you can do things to unwind that, so you're not carrying that energy. And if your kids are doing things that you're like, I know this is part of our system, you can do things, you can use some of the tools that we use in the constellations to work with your family and the way you relate, to change the way that is. So, and also to connect with what you're creating, right? So I feel like there might be something else for you to say before, because I was going to go on a tangent, but I want to.
No, I mean that there's so many tangents that we can go on. And I think the thing that I'm thinking is, when someone works with you, is that part of what you teach them is how to use some of these tools every day?
Yeah. And definitely if people, both in the group stuff, if people sign up for a series, not so much if they come for a one-time thing, which can be very powerful. And you will learn whatever you receive from that. But I also am doing a series right now in person. I'm going to do one online starting in November. And so I mention it some, but the experience of a constellation is so powerful that sometimes that's the teacher. And then when I work with people individually, that I mentor people, and I've mentored people in this work, like I've trained people in this work of constellation. Then if you work with me in an ongoing way, then I can give you more tools and more practices. And also my focus isn't just, it's to help with the healing, but it's actually, I'm an entrepreneur, have been for decades. But what led me into that was the two things, the conscious creation, really, how am I manifesting my life? And I learned tools in that. And then I was also doing the movement stuff, noticing what would create and what would not create, where things kept getting stuck. And as my marriage fell apart and there was all this stuff happening, I was like, I really need a lot of help. And that's when I came to constellation work. So this understanding that we need help beyond ourselves, it actually gets us out of that pattern, and then helps us, tools that really that you can do to be clear in your relating, but also in your creating, right? Like, how are you creating things? You can do a constellation and tune in with the energy of who you're going to be working with in the future, like their energy is creating with you, which comes from the conscious creation tools that I also taught. And so there's a lot of pieces to that. So I actually support people especially people who want to share healing work in the world or creative work in the world, because to me, all of the purpose of me doing this was so that we could all be in our fullest expression, and we can help everyone else be in their most aligned, connected expression. So really connected with the earth, because back to, again, sacred relating, this is about connecting to the bigger energies we're part of. And when we're there, things create, things flow. But yeah, I've taught all of these things at different points in the last decades. And at this point, I bring all those tools when I work with individuals and I work with groups. And especially if you do like a longer series with me, or I've done mentorship programs, because then I can teach you a lot more, and yeah. And what I find is that the power of a constellation experience is so profound, like when you're in it, that I just like a journey dance or even acceptance, the beauty is just being in it and having that experience. And that teaches so much more than my words. And then over time, bringing the words into it. And I actually call what I offer as constellations, integration constellations, because it is, how do we live this way? Like, how do we live more connected with life, with the flow, and with all that we are, right? So I feel like, yeah, definitely tools for that. And I love sharing them. And I think when people participate in constellation work, like when people do series or other things, they get a lot of experiences of that, of what that's like for it to move. And then you start to have this different way of relating. But yeah, I often, with my ongoing clients, we do. How do you keep clearing the energy? Like, we could do a little mini thing here if you have something that could like be a tool people could take with them today, if there's anything.
Yeah. Well, let me think about something that comes up. I guess when you were speaking, I was like, oh, I do that every time I sit down with a client. So I work with people's health goals. And if I sit down with someone, I become totally like entwined with them. I can feel their body. I can feel what's going on. So as you're speaking, I was like, I probably should have a practice where after every client, or at the beginning, end of every day, where I actually like untangle and clear. And I have things I do, but there was something about what you were talking about that made me think you might have something more for me.
Yeah, so let me help you with that. And I'm going to kind of source it from something else you said. Some of us are such high receivers of other people's energies, often because of something systemic in the pattern. Like, we did that. We started, and a lot of people are empaths. We started taking on other people's energies because it was needed in the system. So it's not like wrong. And it helped people survive. Almost when I really start moving, my energy pops and shakes. So it was a survival mechanism. And often we'll take on energy without being in consciousness about it. Like you're saying, you're doing it. And then, so one thing I would do, like what I would do with the group, and this is a really simple thing, is just always when you first meet up with people, like I would say, hi, Arin, I'm Gwendolyn. And so if you already knew each other, is just make sure and say their name. So you start out with a differentiation. And before and then as you're listening to them, you can say, as Arin, sometimes you can claim your place. Your place is your body and your name, right? And claiming our place is more profound than people realize, right? So you could claim your place. And then after each session, which I do, because we go in and we're moving energy together, because the act of bowing has different things. So I often open my palms and just lower my head. And the thing I would invite you to do is just, so I would do it 3 times. You just breathe in what's yours from the exchange, and breathe out what belongs to the other person or anyone else. And I ask the other person to do this too. So breathing in what's mine from this, and breathing out what belongs to Arin and anyone else in the system, right? Because you might have opened up stuff in their story. So there's that. And then doing that again, breathing in just what's yours, breathing out what belongs to Arin and anyone else in her system, and doing that again, breathing in and breathing out. And then the other thing I would do, I like tapping my body, and some people do. I would just say, after you do that, just quickly say, I would say, I am Gwendolyn. And I would invite you to say, I am Arin, right? While you're tapping, because you're claiming your body space. And you'll notice it if you do that. If you start doing that, you'll claim your body space. Just say, I am in your name. Yeah. And just because you're basically telling your body, I'm here, this is our space. You're releasing. And the trick to the releasing energy that I would say for everyone is that the thing you do first is take back what's yours. Because always when you're interacting, some of it's yours. And so in order to, we often naturally ask someone to take energy for us as we take energy for them. So part of the cleanup is to really acknowledge our names and breathe in what's ours and return what belongs to others. So just that conceptual, because often people want to return stuff, but they haven't taken in what's theirs. And there's a reason you would get hooked in something, right? So this is about how do you unwind the pattern. And it's a really powerful tool to just conceptually do with anyone. If you're having a thing with someone, you can just, there's more steps I would give, but you can just think of that person and just breathe in what's yours, return what's theirs. You can even imagine them in front of you and start to get clear. And then there's the energy of creation. What have we created together? So acknowledgement can be like, I'm Gwendolyn, you're Arin. I acknowledge the podcast we're sharing and this opportunity to speak together. And I'll carry what's, I'm going to breathe in what's mine. Thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you is the act of receiving. When we really mean it, a thank you is the act of receiving. Thank you for inviting me. And then I would take in what's mine and return what's yours. But these are really simple things, but they, there's a lot more to the constellation realms, but these are simple tools that you can do to start clearing your energy. If you feel stuck with someone's energy, or you just feel unclear, then you're probably running someone's energy. And more in-depth tools, if we worked more, but yeah. Great. In addition to moving the pieces that are stuck, right? To me, constellations is a whole body of wisdom and practices for people to use.
Well, I am excited for my audience to learn more about this. I can already feel people being like, oh, tell me about that. So if someone wants to engage with you, I know you have some free gifts. Would you tell us the best way for someone to reach out and connect with you?
Yes. So the best way is probably by email, if you're an emailer. It's my website is divinemovements.com. And so movements with an S. And you can also just email me directly, gt@divinemovements.com. So that would be one way. And then if you really are feeling like you want a session or something, the best way is email, and then I can add and let me know you want to be added to my list. If you come through my website, then I'll have you added to my list. And then, so my phone number is also 541-864-9296. So if you want to reach out, and I am offering, just for people who listen to this, a special 30-minute mini session to experience me and my work. And we can pick one thing you want to work on and we'll see what wants to happen. And then you'll get a sense of what I do individually. And then I'm also doing a group constellation next week. So make sure and email me if you're interested in being on that. It'll probably be sometime on the 25th. I'm just kind of confirming with something else. But it'll be probably 5 o'clock Pacific time, but it might be earlier. I'm just trying to figure it out. But on the 25th of, next week on the 25th, it's an eclipse. It's a very, very powerful day. It's a solar eclipse. So I am always with the different systems, including the systems of the earth and the planets and, honoring all the systems. So yeah, if you want to come to that as my guest, you can come. So I'll let you know when that is. Just message me so I can give you that info.
Okay, and I'll put all of that in the show notes. So definitely very grateful to you for not only the gift of the 30 minutes, but just the gift of your time and your story today and sharing this with all of us. I definitely feel like constellation work and the work that you're doing in the world is important and powerful, and I'm excited for all the people this episode will reach. So if you're listening to this episode and you think of someone, take a screenshot right now, share this with them, tell them they have to listen. You can tag me on social media. I'm Jasmine and Juniper Living on Instagram and Arin Fugate on Facebook. I know you can find Gwendolyn Terra on Facebook for sure. Are you on Instagram?
I'm not on Instagram. I want to mention that the constellation I'm doing next week, I do online constellations. I do them in person and online. And I did a whole bunch during the shutdown times. And yeah, so just know that you can do that from wherever. And I do a lot of phone Zoom sessions. So
Oh, great. So anywhere in the world.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I am based out of Ashland, Oregon. So if you are here, you can also work with me in person. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so I'm going to practice this. Thank you, Gwendolyn. I'm Arin. Thank you for everything you've given me. I'm going to keep what's mine and return what's yours.
Thank you, Arin. I'm Gwendolyn. Thank you for the podcast today. I will take back and keep all that's mine, and I will return what's yours.
Oh, that feels good. I love it.
Right? It's like you start feeling cleaner and cleaner, and you notice when you're not, you're like, oh, I'm probably carrying something for someone. I want to clean
So
that.
helpful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, darling. Thank you, everyone who listened. I will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.